So we know that politics is a battle, and that now that battle is everywhere. We kidded ourselves into thinking we were playing a polite game of Candyland, but under the table the other guy had a gun aimed at our crotch. But in a battle, somebody wins. And what happens if we win? I'm not talking about November, I'm talking about something decisive. Do we just try to go back to before the fight got nasty? Try to think of the last time we were happy and carefree, and then go there? Well, that won't work, for the same reason that every time I watch Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, it always has Shia LaBeouf Tarzan swinging with macaques. No matter how many times I rewind. Sure, there were good things in the recent past, and there are good things now, but as long as we've been alive, we've been in the middle of an experiment. Let's call it the neutrality experiment. And who's running it? You guessed it, Frank Stallone. No, sorry, I meant the bad guys, which may or may not include Frank Stallone.
I am down, but I am far from over.
Duly noted. The idea was that some areas of life could be value neutral. If we just gave up some ground, the bad guys would be nice to us. There were parts of life where friend and enemy could meet and there wouldn't have to be a fight. These included schools, art, science, government, music, and stories. Over the past few years, a lot of us have realized that these things aren't neutral, and we've had some help. For the schools, we've had Libs of TikTok. For art, we've had whatever this is. For science, we've had this guy. Then there's government, music, and stories.
We have a problem.
The problem is that a lot of us learned the wrong lesson. Many of us still see neutrality as the goal, a lofty aim that we missed somewhere along the way. But all of these things were battlegrounds way before we started noticing. Art, science, music, stories. Just get back, it's fine. That's because those things are naturally charged with values. The lesson we should have learned is that there's no such thing as value neutrality, especially in institutions. It's a myth, like the Easter Bunny or this guy. I'm kidding, Frank Stallone is real, and he's watching you. Not everything has to be political, but everything is value charged. There's no such thing as bare, uninterpreted fact. Schools are the hub of a lot of this, so of course we let our enemies have them. If only someone would have warned us. The stuff that seems neutral and common sense to you only looks that way because you share those values. Teaching the classics isn't value neutral. Making movies with male heroes isn't value neutral. When Greg Bonson taught college students about apologetics, he had them remember two things about neutrality. Number one, they aren't. Number two, you shouldn't be.
That's right.
And if you want to know the end of the neutrality experiment, look around. This is what so-called neutrality looks like in practice. And you already know there's a Chesterton quote for that. You are free in our time to say that God does not exist, to say that he exists and is evil. You may talk of God as a metaphor or a mystification. You may water him down with gallons of long words or boil him to the rags of metaphysics. And it is not merely that nobody punishes, but nobody protests. But if you speak of God as a fact, as a thing like a tiger, as a reason for changing one's conduct, then the modern world will stop you somehow if it can. We are long past talking about whether an unbeliever should be punished for being irreverent. It is now thought irreverent to be a believer. That book was written in 1908, so you don't get a gold star for noticing it in 2015. Old Gilbert already took them all. Whatever you call this state of things, you can't call it neutral. But we're taught that neutrality just means politeness, and we're very polite people. We don't want to fight because that would be rude. But the country wasn't founded to be value neutral. Nothing you love was. Many of our institutions started off as good, and neutrality was a wedge our enemies used to make them bad. They knew that if you fall for the neutrality trap, you've already lost. Requesting neutrality is requesting a forfeit. If you call some ground neutral, all you're saying is, I won't defend this. So rather than trying to make our institutions neutral, why don't we just try to make them good? Instead of neutrality, we should aim for like-mindedness, having core things in common. The problem is that requires an objective standard, and that sounds divisive. But you can't build a society around multiple contradictory standards. We tried that, and what we got was stuff like this. And there are good and bad ways to fight. We should fight more like Robin Hood and less like Django. Robin Hood wasn't vicious, but you would never say that he was neutral. Of course, this doesn't mean that you have to take a side in every conflict. Not everything is worth your attention. Not every fight is your fight. But in things that are your fight, you should fight. And if we win, we can't go back to pretended neutrality. For now, it should be pretty easy to remember because the fight is far from over. Thanks, Frank.